So I remember getting a phone call probably about 8 years ago from Nan. And so I pick up the phone and I was like, hey, woman, what's going on? She's like, they're trying to kill me. I was just like, who is trying to kill you? And she's like, the food is not good here. They're trying to poison me. And I was like, oh gosh, like what's wrong? Like here I am, like problem solving mode. I was like, woman, what's going on? And she's like, the fruit cocktail is too sugary. She's like, don't they know that it's summer and they should be getting fresh vegetables? Her soup was too cold. Her salad is too hot. They're serving the wrong size meals at the wrong part of the day. And I just listened and listened and I thought, one, she was trying to get me, I think, to take her out to dinner, which I
Truly, yes.
did end up coming home and doing. But I think, it wasn't that there was anything wrong with the food. They were lovely people. I got to know the cook at the village where she was living quite well. She really, really cared about the residents and about the food. But at the end of the day, it was about control. And it wasn't the food that she wanted when she wanted it. And I think, when I think about food, I think it's such an important part of our entire lives. And then we move our loved ones into these facilities, and even the best intentioned facilities, they are trying to feed 40, 50, 60 residents at a time, and there have to be efficiencies that are gained, and they have to make the best decisions that they can for the most number of people. So the fact that she was craving a hot dog and that wasn't what was on the menu for dinner, or that most people like to eat their big meal at lunch, and she still wanted a proper dinner, a proper Sunday evening dinner, and they were giving her soup and a sandwich. It wasn't that they were actively out to get her.
They weren't actually trying to kill her.
No. Contrary to what she believed. But it was different, and it took her a while to really accept. And then I think, what really probably helped the acceptance was the alliance that she made with the cook, who was then willing to give her some control back into the decision making in the kitchen and the groceries that we were able to provide for her. And so, I really want to dive into the topic of food today. Yeah. So, hello, my name is Cortney Steinbacher, and I'm here with my mom, Julie, and we work in the elder law space, and we recently have, been working as caregivers for my nan, for your mom, and, we want to talk about that. And I think, in some of these episodes, we spend time on really heavy topics. And so today I really want to take some time to dive into food, because what's so great about food is that, one, it can be really a tool for health and nutrition, but it can be so many times in caregiving, we say no to things. And food can be a really good place to say yes. And so, before we dive into all of the fun things, I think it's really important to talk to people about why is food so important and why is it such a big deal in caregiving.
And I think you hit on, one of the issues obviously is control, giving back that control. But I mean, another issue is enjoyment. And we can spend some time talking about the enjoyment, which is, probably why you should say yes to that piece of cake, particularly if, your loved one's pretty far in their diagnosis. But I think also, just underlying what you talked about, which is food is important. Many times people who live alone, who maybe have the start of dementia or have something wrong with them, don't properly eat, so they don't have enough water. They're malnourished. Maybe they have dementia and they're forgetting to eat. So, this is a lighter topic, but I want to make sure that we, point out that food is really important medically too. So making sure people are hydrated, they get enough water. Otherwise, they could get urinary tract infections. They, other things could happen. And making sure they do have good nutrition, so that, they are eating and getting enough and not forgetting to. Because so many times, in my career as an elder law attorney, and before that as a social worker at a nursing home, I'd see people who didn't eat or drink well for a long period of time, and that can mess up all kinds of things, from their magnesium levels to, like I said, a UTI. And so we're not medical professionals, but I just want everybody to kind of know, when we're saying say yes to the piece of cake, in this episode, we're in some ways, making the assumption that somebody is, drinking enough water, that they are hydrated, that they are getting, good enough meals consistently enough that, that there's no malnutrition and it's not messing up with them medically. Now, I know some people are going to jump right in with, diabetes and sugar in the cake. And please know, I totally get that. But I think where that divides for me is accepting not to give somebody like this huge piece of cake and they, their diabetes goes up. But rather than just saying no, saying, are there things we could do that would allow that to happen in the caregiver journey? Because just saying no to somebody consistently isn't helpful, especially when that means that person has no control. And it's not even that you're taking control. In that situation, their disease process is taking over control of their lives. And would that a little piece of cake really hurt in the whole scheme of things? And that can depend on where somebody is in their diagnosis, and where you make those decisions. So, before we kind of jump into the fun of all of it, I just think it's really important that, everybody understand the baseline that we start with. Right.
We're not talking about like going and getting, a sheet cake from Sam's Club and just letting them, eat it, but a small piece and I think, this advice really kind of segues with where they are in the process. And so, as we talk through Nan's process, we'll talk about how our attitude towards food really did change.
Yeah, it did.
And so Nan, she was somebody that was like a foodie before that was a thing, right? She enjoyed like going out to a nice meal and like, before wine pairing lists and cocktail pairings were like a thing, right? Like that was really important to her. That's who taught me that, you have a cocktail with your appetizer and you have a wine with your main dish. And, I still do some of that stuff today.
Also, we have to interject here. Also, she's the person that could be extremely happy having a hot dog at Kmart with mustard and onions on it. She had a wide range.
She did. She really
had a wide
did.
range of what she appreciated in the food.
And, food for her was kind of her love language too. So, I think about, why was food important to her? When I was in college, I used to come home and, both grandmothers would be like at the kitchen table. And some might say that I played the grandmothers against each other. I would argue that I was just expressing information to the dinner table. And
as the one who watched you do it, I think you were skillfully crafting a way to get what you wanted.
And if what I wanted was individually prepared vegetable soups from Nan and homemade applesauce from Graham, and if my college roommates were always thrilled when I came back with a cooler full of food, right? Who's to say how that really came about?
The fact that, Nan would make you food and you would announce that in front of your other grandmother and suddenly the applesauce would appear. I think there was a method to your madness.
But it was successful. And so I think, for somebody who took care of me with food, the best thing we could do for her was to return that favor. And so, she did call when she first moved into the village. I'll never forget that phone call. And, I talked about that, they're trying to poison her. They're trying to kill her. They weren't. She
was telling me that too. She was very concerned that she could not sustain this diet that they offered for her.
And I think, in the beginning, it was because she was really paying attention to the food that was fueling her body and making sure that she had a balanced meal. And so the extra sugar in the fruit cocktail was really upsetting to her because we live in a local area where there's a lot of really great farms and there's a lot of really good fresh produce.
And remember, sugar was a big deal to her.
Yes.
The kid who couldn't eat sugar on my cereal. I didn't really know what sugar was until I was an adult, except for when I went to my grandmother's. So that's a big deal to her, right? Yeah.
And I think that's important and thinking about where that's coming from. And so as the people that were caring for her, I can't change what the village is serving to all of their residents. And
funny. Yeah, there was fresh fruit sat out after her input
that was expressed. She at that time she very much made sure her opinion was known, and she did She did force change. That is correct.
That is, yes, she did.
But we also just got the fresh fruit and put it in her room. And and I think that that's important because those are small things that we could do, which is go to the farmer's market and get her berries and bring them in for her. And, a tomato in the summer was really important to her. And
a tomato sandwich, that was one of the things that she absolutely loved. And you're right, I love tomato sandwiches. There's nothing better than, to me, and my husband. I know you don't share this passion, Court.
Yeah, I could probably come up with a list of things that I thought were better, but I'm happy you're happy.
A fresh tomato, cut it. And it's funny, when I started dating my husband, your dad, I said to him, like, my mom makes the best tomato sandwiches, and I know he was like, it's bread, mayonnaise, salt, pepper, and tomato. Like, how can you make it better? And then he tasted one. And, I'm happy to report to everybody, like, I inherited that ability, however simple it may be. But one of the things, though, is that, food is important. And so if I was sitting there enjoying a tomato sandwich, I thought, oh, gosh, I got to get her one and take that over to her. And I didn't worry about, was I bringing it to her right at dinner time or the perfect time? I just made sure she got to have some of that tomato sandwich too. And that was something that could make our visits so much nicer. And I think, she was heard that, that she was maybe wanting something different than what was repeatedly being offered to her.
And it gave her a choice, like the next day. So she could decide to eat what we brought, or she could go out and eat with the village. But that was really about control for her. And I think, when you first start talking about the food journey, the control was so important. But also she liked to go to the grocery store.
She did, yeah.
So I can't tell you the last time I was in a grocery store. I would rather just get my groceries delivered. I live in Boston. Going to the grocery store is a little bit more complicated than it was in rural Pennsylvania. She loved it. And so, even just like letting her go to the grocery store, she also really enjoyed just going out to dinner. And so sometimes, we think about like going to visit somebody and they're living in a facility. And so what do you do with them? Well, maybe you take them out to dinner, take them out to their favorite place, let her order what she wants. And here's the thing, if it was too much, either you or I would make the decision to just eat part of hers, or let her take the leftovers home and let her eat them the next day, because she was always so happy to reheat the leftovers and eat them the next day. And then she didn't have to eat what the village was offering, right? And so I think, early on, we did still stick with the balanced meals, but it was more about giving her control over the choices that she had and what she was eating. And then as it got, later into her journey, food was really a good place to say yes. So she was, we've talked before, she was losing so much weight. It was taking so much energy for her to breathe. And so we weren't as worried about
what she was having. Yeah. So for our listeners, she unfortunately passed away from restrictive lung disease. And one of the things that was a gift to me is learning through the palliative care certified registered nurse practitioner of just how much how much energy and calories she needed just to continue to survive. So, I didn't know that. I knew she was eating a lot of peanuts and grapes and bananas, which are the things she wanted. And I thought, my goodness, I just ordered 3 cans of those peanuts and they're gone. But the certified registered nurse practitioner, Jody, let me know that, yeah, that's what I should expect, and so, and make sure I had it there for her, because they were the things that she liked. And of course, ice cream.
Well, and ice cream was such a fun thing, because when we think about, when we're taping this, it's June, and for her, June would signify the opening of Fill It Up, which was the local ice cream place. She loved to go get an ice cream.
Yeah, she loved every part of that. She loved getting out and looking around, like you would drive her someplace, and she would point out to you things that, you don't even see because you're looking at it every day. And for her, it was like how it looked different from the last time she was out, and she was just so happy both with getting her little ice cream cone, but the ride back and forth and being able to do that. But But that again underscores kind of what we're saying to everybody is that food and activities around food are really important. They're such a part of our culture and our upbringing, and it can change from ethnicity to ethnicity. But so many cultures at the middle of it is food, and so making sure that whatever system that's out there that somebody's living in acknowledges food, and what somebody wants, and then as caregivers, not just always being in this situation where you're saying no, 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 but really how can we have some of that and enjoy it, because it's so foundational to who we are as human beings.
When I think we'd be remiss to not talk about food as it comes to holidays. So
yes.
So Nan, we always had Christmas Eve with Nan's family. So it would be us and then Uncle Buddy and all of the kids. So there's probably like 10 of us or so. Mm-hmm. And the Christmas ham was really important. And I remember when we shifted from Nan doing the holidays to you doing the holidays, you kept all of the food exactly the same, even though you hated it.
Yeah, there were some parts of it I did not like. You're right.
I really held on to the potato salad because you had a ham and the ham sandwich. And for you, like, I remember you wanted the food to be warm.
Yes, I did.
And that's a really big deal. But for Nan, it was the sandwich and we had the potato salad, and she always had a small dish because Dad doesn't like the eggs in the potato salad. And so, the first year you kept it exactly the same. Like, this is what she made. This is what we're having on Christmas Eve. And, we've changed that over the years. Slowly but surely you have
mostly adding to it.
Yeah. Well, last year we didn't have potato salad. Not that I'm upset about it, but I do think we should bring it up.
Yeah. Add that back.
Well, we've added soup, which she really enjoyed, but was different.
But we added soup she'd really like.
Right.
So clam chowder, which she loves. Yeah. So, and that was helpful to me because it was warm, which is what I wanted. I wanted some warm in my meal.
And, I think going forward, it's funny, we were driving into New York City, which is where we're, filming this podcast. And, you talked about, we always got the ham from Tony's. So Tony's is this local deli. And, part of, the journey of growing and things are getting different is a lot of things are outside of our controls. They were just recently bought out. And so, it's so funny how that goes to the family. Like, Uncle Buddy calls you call me, and my immediate reaction is, what are we going to have for Christmas? It's
right.
like, you can't.
Is the ham going to be as good?
Well, because it has to be a Tony's ham. And we got that from her. There are lots of places. It's not like it's that rural. There are 4 grocery stores.
I'm sure other places order from the same place that Tony's got the ham. I mean, right. they didn't raise the pay.
Well, but we're not even going to Wegmans to get this ham. We're going to track down Tony's wholesale supplier to secure this ham because God forbid it not be the ham that she wanted.
And how crazy is it? And this is going to sound maybe bizarre to some people, but we're driving into the city last night and we're talking about this, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm so glad she's passed and she doesn't have to go through this.
I did have that moment because I was this would really upset her.
Yes.
Thank goodness that it was the same and all of their recipes were the same. No, I had the same thought. I was like, this would really upset her.
After you obsessed about stockpiling a whole bunch of it, I don't know, you can't really stockpile those types of things. So some of them are fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it just underscores how you don't even realize how food and different things kind of filters through your life and what was important, and the decisions that we're even making right now after she's passed are so influenced on the things that she did while she was living. And there's a question of, do we even want ham for Christmas? I don't even know if I could ask that. You know what I mean?
Well, clearly you can't, because I tried not to have ham for Easter and I ended up having to buy the ham kind of last minute.
And so I think, it's a little bit more than the ham, right? Like there are other things that she really enjoyed. And I think this goes back to sometimes like caregivers, like you get decision fatigue.
Yes.
And so like, what are you having for dinner? What are she having for dinner? And now like, it's almost like we're adding one more thing for people to think about. But I think it can be easier than that. Don't you think?
Oh, I do. You know, and when you're talking about some of this, I'm thinking about, you know, all the times that like I probably didn't realize like the impact, but now I kind of do. But we're making something for dinner that she really liked, and I would always take time afterwards to like pack a little bit up for her and take it to her. So there were some meals that either she wasn't going to get where she was living, or the way they made them just wasn't going to be quite the way that she did it. So pork, sauerkraut, hot dogs. So, you know, we actually, my husband and I, actually, he would say he does this, and that is true, make sauerkraut every year, like homemade sauerkraut. And so that tastes a certain way. And so, you know, you can buy in a can, and no disrespect to the can, but it just doesn't taste quite the same. And so that was a big deal to her. So every time we would have that, I would pack it up and send it over to her. And I think, you know, that's where you're kind of talking about, like, it's not something extra or something more I had to do, just kind of more incorporating it into what I was doing already. So we were already having that as a meal. All I'm doing is, you know, packing up a little bit of leftovers. And then, yeah, I'm going to have to take it to her, you know, but I'm going to go anyways and visit, you know, so I might as well. And again, I never really kind of tied myself to, did she eat it all? Did she eat it at the right time? Like maybe I didn't go over until 8 o'clock at night. But I would heat up just a little bit of it, and she would love just those couple of little bites. And honestly, even though she had to eat a lot because of her restrictive lung disease, she had to eat small amounts often. And so it was fine with her. And I never married myself to, did she end up eating it all or not? Like if I saw it in there and she didn't eat the rest of it, that didn't matter to me, because that could have been that she just forgot. Nobody was heating it up. You know, I probably was there too and forgot that it was even in there. But she had those couple of bites that really, really, really are important to her. And so I think one of the kind of actionable things for people to be thinking about is, you know, if you're sitting down thinking, oh gosh, whoever I'm caring for really loves this meal, and they're not there, pack it up and take it to them. And I don't care if what facility they're in or what their stage is. A couple of bites of something is enough. It's, you know, and it changes the visit. It doesn't put more on you. And again, fundamentally, it goes back to food is so important in our lives. Control and enjoyment and traditions and weaving who we are as people. And so it's just a really important thing to be sharing.
I also think, you know, we talked a little bit about Christmas, but we also like people's like birthdays and things like that. And I think so often, like I would sit down and be like, gosh, like what do I get this woman? Right. Mm-hmm. So like she lived in actually a quite big room, to be honest with you, but not a lot of extra space. And so like, am I really going to get her like a knick-knack or something like that? So I leaned more into...
one more thing I have to hang up someplace. I'm glad you didn't.
I believe you called me and we had that conversation. And so I stopped getting, well, I think you said one more freaking thing to dust around, right? So, you know, I leaned more into perishable things. And so usually for her birthday, I did something like flowers or something like that she loved, and they would come. But I also, you know, a couple of times did, you know, there's really great, like she loved chocolate. And so I would do like subscription boxes where she get to try different chocolates or things like that. Or for Christmas, you know, if I was like out and about traveling for work, I would pick up different things so that she could try them. I remember one time, you know, this is where caregiving's not perfect. They opened up this really nice new Swiss chocolate shop in the Prudential Center in Boston. And I was so excited. And so I went in, and it took me a while. Like, this isn't something like I just like, oh, just like flippantly bought. Like, I was like, oh, like, what would she like? And so I'm thinking about it. And these are expensive. And so, but like fine, because like I wasn't really getting her a lot. So for her, it was more about having things to open. So I tried to do like small things, and so whatever. So I'm so excited. I bring these chocolates home, and I'll never forget, my sister got her like Hershey chocolate bars
with almonds.
She raved.
Oh, yeah.
about these Hershey chocolate bars with almonds.
That Steph probably brought at the local Dollar General.
Right, for like $1. And I like painstakingly picked out these like Swiss chocolates and drove them 400 miles home, right? And I was just like, oh my God. Like, she's like, well, they weren't as good. And I was just like, no, you don't understand. Like, these are actually much better.
But no disrespect to Hershey's chocolate. Like, we're from Pennsylvania. We love Hershey's. Like, there's
I do. But it was
but you were going for something a little out of the ordinary, special,
different. But I think too, accepting that she just really wanted the Hershey bar.
She did.
I never bought another different chocolate bar again.
Yeah, it was just easier. Yeah. When I would check out at like, CVS, and you get like the long receipt and you get this like $3 of a rebate that, you're never going to use because it's going to expire by the time you remember again. I would always just take those and buy some chocolate bars. And then when I would go and I would give them to her, she'd be like so excited about those chocolate bars.
And so some of that is, I could be upset about the fact that, and I was a little, but not anymore, about the fact that like I was trying to do something nice and it wasn't received. But it's really, that's not the point of this. The point is to serve her in the way that she wanted. So if she wanted the simple Hershey's chocolate bar, just to go with that. I also think about my grandfather who had dementia. My gram would leave out, and she did this like when we were kids. She still does this.
Yep.
She would buy like peanut M&Ms or peanut butter M&Ms.
Peanut butter M&Ms. Oh, they're so good.
And they are. And my pap loved peanut butter. So I remember being a kid, and every year for Lent, that's what he gave up was peanut butter, because it was like he went through jars and jars of it. And I can remember like she would just leave the peanut butter M&Ms sitting out, and I can
on the dining room table right where he walked by.
Yes,
by the way, yeah.
To get from the kitchen to like his chair where he would watch TV. And I remember like being there one time, and she was like yelling at him that he's eating the peanut M&Ms, the peanut butter M&Ms. And I'm just
the
like,
other person with dementia. Yeah.
Right. I was just like, oh my God, he's had dementia for 11 years, like relatively advanced at this point, and he doesn't remember not to eat the M&Ms.
Right. You could put them away.
Right.
You could, yeah.
But it was also just like at that point in time,
let him eat them.
What's the harm? So like we had, I think about, we had to say no to him so many times about so many different things. And especially when the dementia was more advanced. Now I do know there was a concern about him eating like too many sweets, because he definitely had a sweet tooth.
Yes.
Like it's funny. He was a person, and this is, kind of how Graham would make meals, is that like on Sunday, like a Sunday meal was a really big deal to him. And there would be a dessert, and like my Graham, she would make the best pies.
You didn't have a meal without a dessert. Right. Yeah.
And so that's very much so like he always had a sweet tooth. So I totally like my grandma's coming from the right place in that he did have to watch his sugar. But as the dementia got advanced, it was kind of like, well, is that peanut butter M&M really hurting anybody? Now, the thing that you have to think about is 1 or 2, but he was such a big guy. He had big hands. And so like I would probably only grab like 3 or 4, or you're a little kid and you can only hold 4 in your hand. He would pick up like half a dozen to a dozen, because that's what fit in his hand.
Yeah. I can remember watching him, sitting with him, and sometimes I would sit there and do work, so I'd be there for a while. And, I would like, they're out, and like, yeah, like I don't want to say no, because, what else does he have? And he loves them. He loves, peanut butter. But, and so I'd be like, oh, I'm just going to let him do it. But then he'd go with that big hand and he'd grab the whole, like half the dish, and I'd be like, oh goodness. But, I think there's a balance between maybe we could have put less out.
Right.
Because I think if the bowl was empty, he would have been okay with that. But I mean, I certainly, in the hours that I was there, and I didn't do, I wasn't as heavily involved. My husband definitely did a lot of that. And of course, his wife, my mother-in-law. But when I was there, like, I was like, I'm not saying no to that. I'm not getting that peanut butter from that man. But I would have been more happy if he hadn't like come with his big hands and, gotten this whole thing and then popped him in his mouth.
And I think, that's what we're talking about here is, it was a great place just to say yes.
It is.
And I think that that's important. But it also, there's a balance of maybe didn't need to empty the whole bag of M&Ms into the dish, right?
Right.
And so like, and if they weren't there, he may not have known that he was missing them, but if he enjoyed them, there really is no harm. And I think that's where like a couple of this, you know, as people get more advanced in their diagnosis, you know, if they want to eat the same thing, right, for a couple of days, or they want a half a piece of cake before they eat their meal, or they're eating a couple of small meals, it really, as long as they're eating, is really okay. And I also think sometimes you have to take a step back. Like sometimes I feel like when I talk to different people, there's like this emergency and they're like, you know, the person I'm caring for isn't eating at all. And it's like, well, do they not like it? Like, because I think about myself, like, I really don't like onions. Like, I, like, do not put them on a salad.
Neither did your pap.
I know. And so, like, I, you know, definitely got that from him. And, like, even when his dementia was, like, very advanced, he would not have eaten a salad if there was an onion on it. And so,
And just so all of our listeners know, we've recently traveled to Colombia, the country of Colombia, and you know they speak Spanish in that country. Courtney really doesn't like onions, and in fact, quite honestly, when we were ordering some takeout, she knew how to say no onions in Spanish. She didn't know a lot of other things.
But I knew what was important. Like I didn't want the onions on my hamburger. And so I knew how to say that and express that in the language in which they were taking my order.
So I would be fully supportive if somebody was caregiving for Courtney and they put onions on it, you were not eating it.
No. And
it doesn't matter that you wanted the hamburger or you wanted whatever, you're not eating it with those onions in it.
No, I'm not. And I think that's because then we can raise this flag of like, oh my God, they're not eating. And and then it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of, oh my gosh, they're going to get malnourished and this and that and the other thing. And it's like, well, maybe it doesn't take us 3 doctor's visits. If there were onions on it, he wasn't eating it.
No, he wouldn't have. And I think there's like a balance here between, in my mind, it's going from saying no to how can I say yes in some way. So maybe if they want ice cream and there is some concern, giving less ice cream, but not saying, no, you can't have ice cream. Because for so much of us, the eating of it, even though like today in the US, we eat such large portions, but we all know it's the first couple of bites that are like the best, you know? And so, you know, I would say, you know, thinking about how is it that you can say yes to those things. And I think, you know, again, if like you're dealing with somebody who is diabetic, and that's a real concern. You know, thinking about how do you get better sugar-free alternatives? Because if you just keep saying no to the thing but don't give an alternative, you know, we all know that. Like, you know, recently, as probably all women my age are trying to do. In some ways, I'm trying to like, you know, I'm going through a period of time where it's pretty easy to gain some weight, and so I'm watching what I'm eating. And, you know, for my Easter basket in there was some sugar-free candy that was really good, you know, and that satisfied me. So that there again, it's, you know, giving that alternative and figuring out how not to say no. You don't have to say yes to 3 bowls of ice cream or the whole cake like we talked about, but how can you say yes in some manner and preserve the essence of whatever that means to that person?
When I think that goes back to sometimes, you know, we talked about we used to like sit with Pat, right? And so you weren't like we called it watching him. You weren't really like he was relatively like self-sufficient. Somebody just needed to be there in case he needed something. But like you know, sometimes I would take work down, although this is going to be crazy for people to think. You had to download all of it. My grandma didn't have Wi-Fi until about 6 months ago. And so,
which was for a picture frame.
Right.
We do have our priorities, but go ahead.
And the cell phone service wasn't always great. So it's not like I could just like load up my hotspot, right? And so, you know, if she had said to me, like, these are his favorite chips, can you pre-portion them into like different containers so that she didn't have to think about it when she was in the middle of it? Like, I'd have sat there and done it. And so I think that goes back to sometimes, like, I would have appreciated having something to do that while he was taking a nap or different things like that. Like, I was really just kind of like hanging out with him. And so, you know, that's something to think about too. Like, how do you make it easier for the caregiver for them to say, maybe not all the way, yes, but kind of,
Yeah.
right? Like you can have part of this. And so if we think about, getting the caregiver like the containers, and you could prepackage them so they can just hand them a bag of chips and different things like that. Pap always ate like the pretzels and stuff. He always had like a mid-afternoon kind of like snack before dinner. And so, or, could we have prepped fruit or different things like that? Like, sure, you can buy some of that stuff prepped, but it can be more expensive. So if you're thinking about, caregiving is already kind of expensive, a place to cut costs if you buy it in bulk and then have somebody, a grandchild or, a niece or a nephew that's sitting there, prepackage some of that stuff so it's easier. I think that can be a great way to get people involved, but also make it easier for you to say yes, because sometimes when you're in the heat of it, it's harder and easier to say no kind of at the same time. So it's like you can't even think through that they could have a little bit of ice cream. Like I think about Nan, at the village, she never had like a big quart of ice cream because she probably would have made herself a relatively big bowl.
She would have, yes.
But she had they used to give out the small things of ice cream that were already prepackaged, and she would just have one.
And she was okay with that.
And she was happy.
Yeah, she was. And there's certainly people who are listening who are caring for somebody, particularly somebody who has some form of dementia, you're going to give them the small dish and they're going to want more. And again, I'm not saying you keep giving them that dish, but I'm also saying, don't make your first reaction be saying, no, you can't have any more, or you already had some. Maybe you give them that one small dish, and when they want more, you say, okay, we will in a little bit. So again, that's not saying no, saying, pushing it down the road, we'll do that in a little bit. Because, certainly we're talking about this and we want to highlight the importance of food. And, have a mindset of maybe we can say yes or not say no in some ways. But we're not sitting here saying that this isn't hard and that it's going to be perfect and that in every situation you're going to give a small bowl of ice cream and they're going to be okay with it. We didn't even really get into, we're talking about food, but obviously drink's also really important. Yeah. And alcohol becomes, a part of this for so many people. And so certainly, that's another thing that we often immediately say no to. And, today there's such an explosion of non-alcoholic alternatives in beer and wine that weren't there years ago. And I think, again, kind of the same thing that we talked about with food is kind of using that same idea of, however you feel about it, but really how that person who you're caregiving for feels about it and what place that thing was in their lives, I think is important to be thinking about. And, do I think, we should be giving out a keg party or, no, but, a half a beer, maybe that's okay. Or a glass of wine or half a glass. And of course you want to consult the physician, but you want to consult the physician from the perspective of, I'd like not to say no. So what would be an okay amount, or what would be a good alternative, or if I am going to do this, what's the best way that I do it, And so having a deeper conversation, even with our medical professionals, to kind of explore, is some amount of this okay? Because remember, a lot of what we hold about alcohol is very specific to our country and our culture, or some of the cultures around it, and so. It's not the end all. So there's many places in the world, where, a half a glass of red wine would almost seem necessary.
It's funny you bring up alcohol. I remember coming home once and I had taken about a half a day off of work, and Nan wanted to run some errands and then she wanted to go out to dinner. And I said, sure. So, I took the half day off and I was like, I'm going to do this. And I knew she wanted to order a beer. I knew based on where she wanted to go for dinner. So I remember texting you and you said, she just wants to know that she can. Mm-hmm. She's not going to drink it. And so I was like, okay. She's on some pretty, heavy meds. So I was like...
And she had drop foot. So it was an issue of if she's drinking and she wasn't as steady on her feet, there's a real risk there, yeah.
But I knew that on the back end of this, even if so I was like, okay, well, if she drinks half of it, I still have time this evening. I can sit with her. So I would never want to take her out give her 3 beers and then give her back to the village and be like, I don't know, you might have to watch her, right? Like I knew on the back end of it that like I could sit there for an hour and and like help her get ready for bed and like put her in her chair. And you know, when you said that to me, I was like, this is about her exercising control, that like we're not going to say no to her, and she can.
Yeah, and also I think in that circumstance, I knew sometimes I said no to her, but I think if you had said no to her, it would have hit her harder in a different way. So there's also who's saying no. Yes. So even if I'm holding it steady and being like, no, not right now, or I don't think that's the best idea. Although I have to say, in my circumstance, the advice I gave you worked for me.
It did not. She downed the beer before the appetizer came. And then she wanted a second one. And I was like, oh, God. I was like, no, woman. But, you know, it was interesting to me. If I had thought that through, I could have talked to the waitress and had them bring the Budweiser NA without the alcohol in it. And that probably would have satisfied her, because for her, a little bit it was about the beer, but some of it was about the appearance, that she was fine, that she went into a restaurant where the waitresses knew her, had known her for a very long time, and that I was home and I was over 21, and she was a little bit, it wasn't even really about the beer. It was about almost saving face, in that like she's fine and everything's normal.
Yeah, and that does feel more normal from her, and it's an escape from, you know, what she was dealing with. And so, and we all need that. We all need an escape back to a place where it's a little nicer. And, you know, this podcast is, you know, dedicated to her. Hey woman, is what we used to call her. We'd walk in our thing and say, hey woman, how are you? But you know, part of this is us kind of going through some feelings of our own, because she was a complicated little woman. Sure. You know, we laugh on here. But you know, one of the stories that I just think has to be told is, you know, during COVID.
Oh gosh.
During COVID, she ended up being the supplier of alcohol for many people in the facility that she.
Yes. So for many of us, you know, during COVID, we were shutting down, we were sheltering in place. She was entrepreneurial.
She was.
And so, you know, at the time there was, you know, I was over 21. I think maybe my cousin Abby was, Uncle Buddy. She knew better than to ask you.
Yeah, she never asked me.
But Dad, because she would call Dad and she would say, like, she was so sad that she was out of beer. And like for my dad, he's like, oh my God, like that's a tragedy. So I'll never forget it. We were standing in the garage. So we were like,
would she even enlisted Uncle Buddy's ex-wife?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So just so everybody knows, like this is quite the crew that she had assembled.
Her wholesaler network was quite large. So I remember standing in the garage. Uncle Buddy had just like dropped off something to her, and we're all like, you know, we're social distancing, but we're standing outside and we're all like chit chatting. And it was Uncle Buddy and my cousin Lexi, my dad and I. And Uncle Buddy's like, yeah, I just dropped off like an 18-pack of beer, and my dad's like, well, I just dropped off like beer like a couple of days ago. I was like, oh my God, you guys. I was like, I just bought like 4 like the big bottles of wine.
Yeah.
And Lexi, my cousin Lexi, she's like, well, my mom, my uncle's ex-wife, she's like, she was just there. I was like, oh, and so then I like remember going to you. I was like, oh my God, like this is a problem. Like she's not on pain meds right now, but like, my God, she's drinking. And so, and just so everybody knows, like liquor laws in Pennsylvania are a little bit funny. So like I didn't always go to the liquor store. Sometimes I would get her groceries and I would get the alcohol at the same time.
It's a new thing to even be able to get any alcohol at a grocery store in Pennsylvania. Like, so yeah. And you can't get a lot.
No. And so she like would get really mad at me because I would just get 2 of the big bottles of wine. That's all that you're allowed to get at one time. And in order to buy more, you had to take it out to your car and like come back in. And I was like, I'm not going out to my car, dropping off the alcohol, then walking back into the grocery store. I was like, woman, like there's a global, like I didn't want to be in the grocery store at all. And she
Well,
was,
also the person that's waiting on you, probably somebody like you went to high school with, and they're
Yes.
gonna be like, oh, look at her going out and like coming back in.
I know, like it's a very small town. So, we're kind of like having this revelation of like, oh my God. And so there's like a group chat that started because we're like, we've got to start limiting how much and then you're on a work meeting.
Yeah, I'm in a work meeting. So, I'm one of the owners of the community that she lives in. And they're talking about people having alcohol. They shouldn't have alcohol. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, my mom is the supplier. And that's exactly what happened. She was getting us all to drop it off. Well, not me, because she knew like I probably wouldn't for her, but not me, but everybody else. And then she was doling it out amongst her friends at her community where she lived. And, that's, that again, underscores how important like food is, like, and drink being part of that, how important all of these are, and she saw a need within her community and she filled it.
She did. And at what profit margins, I'm not sure because she never paid me back for the alcohol that I was supplying. And so I'm not sure that she ever, charged people or if she was just, a good Samaritan.
And it's important to everybody that we can laugh at this story today.
I don't believe you were laughing then. And I believe that she told you that she was fine and she was doing what she needed to do for her
I
community.
tried to talk to her about state laws and, all kinds of things. And she felt like it was an unmet need of her fellow members of her community and that she didn't intend to stop in any way. And that if her crew needed to be expanded into other things, that she had been found out, that she was happy to do that. This isn't a time this woman couldn't drive,
Right.
So.
Or text, and she did expand her distribution network because it got shut down, or severely limited. And so, I think, what I hope everybody got from today is that, while food is so important nutritionally for all kinds of reasons.
And can impact medical diagnoses. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's really important to talk to your medical professionals about like how this interacts with different things. It can be a really great place to say yes. And it can really be a fun and interesting part of the caregiving journey. And so much of it is hard and complicated. And this really, what I hope people understand is that it can be a fun place and it can be an interesting place to go back and think about, like, why do you eat the things that you do and the traditions? And so I want to thank people for listening here today. Go ahead and comment and rate us and follow us on Instagram and TikTok and all of those great social media platforms. And so I just want to thank you for listening. And hopefully, if you are caregiving, you think about food just a little bit differently in that journey.
Absolutely.